On October 17th, 2023, David Tronnes, the man who once sobbed in front of cameras while talking about his wife's death, was sentenced to life in prison for being the very person who took her life. From the very moment David called 911 to report that his wife was unresponsive in the bathtub, a strange coldness crept into every word he said. During 4 full hours in police custody, he never once asked, "Is my wife alive?" Something that would come instinctively to almost any husband. But David was different. He asked for water, a blanket, thanked the officers, asked for the time, but never once mentioned his wife's name. Instead, he talked about the house, the renovations, and the reality TV show the couple had been planning to join. In David's eyes, the death didn't destroy his life. It was just a script error in a performance that hadn't aired yet. A woman died in the very home she had purchased, and a husband cried, but only because his dream of being on TV had just fallen apart. David cried, but it was the kind of crying that happened on cue, triggered when police mentioned love, and cut off the moment the topic shifted to home design. When asked what had happened, he repeated the same script. She slipped. When challenged on why the bathtub was unusually dry, David didn't respond like someone in shock. He simply adjusted the story. No panic, no emotional conflict. Everything felt rehearsed. And that was the key. Skilled liars rarely tremble. He stays calm, too calm. In the released video, David was brought into the interrogation room with a blanket and a bottle of water, items commonly provided to help calm someone who may be in a state of shock. Yet his expression was the opposite of someone who had just lost their wife. No panic, no spontaneous tears, no distant, glassy-eyed stare. His eyes kept darting around, a sign his brain was processing a script, not grief. His face remained disturbingly composed. No muscle twitches, no red, swollen eyes, no tremors, the kind of involuntary reactions that usually accompany a real emotional collapse. Most notably, David's tone during those early responses was low, steady, cold, completely devoid of the breaks or stutters often heard from someone in mourning. Investigators noted, throughout those initial hours of questioning, he never once asked, "How is my wife?" A response that runs counter to the biological instinct of someone emotionally bonded to the victim. This became a powerful behavioral clue, pointing to emotional detachment, a trait commonly seen in individuals with antisocial tendencies or personality disorders. In a murder case where the suspect is the victim's closest loved one, a calm and emotionless demeanor isn't a sign of innocence. It's more like a silent confession. Because while shock can numb emotions, those who deliberately control their expressions often have something to hide. But he showed no shock. His face was alert, his eyes shifting constantly, and his breathing stayed calm. He thanked officers politely, apologized for minor interruptions, a level of self-control wildly out of place for a man who just lost his spouse. Police left him alone for over 4 hours, a common technique used to observe natural reactions. David showed no worry, no distress. He didn't mutter to himself. He didn't ask questions. He simply requested to use the bathroom and waited. For a man whose wife had just died, that's deeply abnormal. Only when investigators began to press harder did the tears arrive. But these weren't the tears of someone shattered by loss. They were conditioned responses, like a rehearsed reflex. Behavioral psychology tells us that real crying often comes with uncontrollable physical signs: shaking, breathlessness, red eyes, pale skin, interrupted sobs, rapid breathing. Fake crying, in contrast, tends to arrive late, after a pause, often with dry eyes, and can stop suddenly when the subject changes. With David, the tears only came when needed, when covering up emotion was required, and ended the moment the attention faded. This led investigators to believe he wasn't grieving, he was performing, like a director staging his scene. Like an actor who only turns on the tears when the spotlight hits, David only cried when someone was watching, and stopped the second they weren't. Eventually, detectives concluded that David's emotions were situational, not genuine. Whenever they pushed him on his actions, he wept. But when the conversation shifted to finances or home renovation, his face lit up again. The seamless emotional shift made them realize this was someone who manipulated emotions like props in their hands, Criminal psychology experts suggest that David Tronnes represents a type of person so obsessed with self-image that even his emotions became tools of control. In psychological terms, this is known as adaptive narcissism, an extreme form of self-love where every feeling is manipulated to preserve a crafted ideal. David wasn't just someone who dreamed of fame. He was someone who needed to be seen, someone who validated his very existence through the eyes of others. This explains why he became so consumed with the idea of being on a reality TV show that he turned his house, and even his wife, into part of the project. So when Shanti refused to sign off on filming, David didn't just see it as a setback to his dreams. He saw it as a threat to his ideal self-image. In David's mind, Shanti was no longer a partner. She was an obstacle, one that needed to be removed for the script to proceed. And he didn't remove her in a moment of rage. He did it with the cold precision of someone rewriting a scene. What's chilling is what came next. After committing the crime, David continued to direct the rest of the performance, this time taking on the role of the grieving husband. But just like before, he wasn't performing for others. He was performing to preserve the image he'd constructed in his own mind. A kind man, a victim of an accident, a devoted husband. And that is what made this case truly chilling. A man who could mask murder behind a faint smile and a courteous nod. If someone kills out of hatred, we can try to understand. If it's for money, we can find a motive. But David Tronnes didn't kill his wife for money. He killed her because she damaged the flawless image he had built inside his own mind. That's a different kind of motive, a cold one. Not born of emotion, but of complete emotional emptiness. Throughout the entire investigation, David showed no panic, no signs of inner conflict. He controlled every expression, like someone watching himself perform on a screen. This is a classic psychological profile of an individual with antisocial personality tendencies, someone who doesn't feel guilt, can't truly empathize, and uses facial expressions as tools of communication rather than reflections of inner emotion. That's why David cried when needed, smiled when needed, apologized when needed, but none of it had soul. It was like watching a puppet recite lines perfectly memorized, down to the last period. The police didn't need a confession. All they had to do was watch. He wasn't a man grieving. He was a man playing the role of someone grieving. Shanti didn't die from a single blow. She died the moment she was written out of the script of his life. Her death was just the final act. And the most heartbreaking tragedy of all was this. She had no idea she was merely a character in his story, until the stage went dark and the curtain fell. In October 2023, after more than 5 years of investigation and delay, David Tronnes finally stood trial in Orlando. The trial lasted 5 days, but what gripped everyone wasn't just the evidence, it was his demeanor. As prosecutors laid out the facts, the victim's blood found on the bed, not the bathtub, as David had claimed, the ligature marks on her neck, and testimony that he had removed her engagement ring after she died. David sat motionless, his face ice cold. No breakdown, no outburst, no shock. Friends of Shanti, including Dana Duran, were called to testify. Dana stated that she was familiar with the couple and often helped mediate their relationship conflicts. She also expressed her disappointment that after Shanti's death, Tronnes never reached out to inform her. Her words echoed through the courtroom like a prophecy, and David sat there, motionless, without a flicker of response. Detective Barbara Sharp, the lead investigator who directly questioned David, stood before the jury and made it clear. He never once asked about his wife, not a single question, not one moment of genuine shock. What stood out most, David never called a single witness in his defense. His attorney remained completely silent, merely suggesting that other possibilities existed, yet failed to present even one. The verdict was delivered: first-degree murder, life in prison without parole. And as the sentence was read aloud, David sat still, hands folded neatly on the table, eyes forward, showing no tremble, no tear. A trial that didn't just close a case, it brought an end to a 5-year-long performance. The David Tronnes case is a chilling illustration of where obsession with self-image collides with antisocial personality disorder. It shows just how thin the line can be between a craving for validation and the complete destruction of another human being, simply because they disrupted an ideal. David didn't kill in a moment of rage. He killed like a director editing a flawed scene, and then kept directing the next act, the tears, the statements, the mannerisms. A perfectly rehearsed performance, soulless. When the verdict came down, he didn't cry. He didn't collapse. He simply sat there, calm, collected, as if he had already written this moment into his script. And perhaps that's the most terrifying part, when evil doesn't come with a twisted face, but with calm eyes, a polite smile, and a bow at the right time. In a world where image can overshadow truth, David Tronnes has become the symbol of a new kind of killer, not the impulsive or enraged, but the calculated, the composed, the man who bends emotions until he himself looks like the victim. His crime wasn't just in what he did, but in the fact that he no longer recognized it as wrong. And that may be the deepest confession of all.